Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the UFLI Teaching Reading Online webinar series after party. My name is Colleen Paula, and I will be your host this evening. We at Team UFLI have been absolutely blown away by the response to our webinar series and to our teaching hub. We have built a community of over 17,000 of you on our UFLI Facebook page. Tens of thousands of teachers from all over the world logged in to watch our webinars, and we recently passed 1 million visits to our virtual teaching resource hub. So thank you so much for engaging with us and for making this work so worthwhile. We are thrilled to have our entire panel back with us tonight to share the latest resources we've published to the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub and to answer your most frequently asked questions. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our Facebook page and our website for on-demand playback. If you have your smartphone handy, you can scan the QR code on the screen here to bookmark our Virtual Teaching Resource Hub page. And the URL is here as well. And this QR code here will bring you to our website where you can watch the entire webinar series on demand. So keep that phone, that smartphone handy, because we'll have codes throughout the presentation tonight to link to several new resources that you'll definitely want to save and check out. So this evening, we are going to revisit each of the webinars from the 6-part series to address our most frequently asked questions about each topic. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Holly Lane, the director of the University of Florida Literacy Institute, to speak about our first 2 topics, an introduction to teaching reading online and a tour of the UFLI Virtual Teaching Resource Hub. Welcome, Dr. Lane.
Thanks, Colleen, and hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're thrilled to have you back. To start us out, I just want to recap a couple of ideas from our initial webinar series, and then get started addressing some of the questions that were addressed in the follow-up surveys. So just to remind you, our goal here is to help you figure out how to take high quality reading instruction from the classroom to online. And there are a number of methods and approaches that we have discussed in the webinar series, and I really encourage you to watch all of the webinars if you haven't already. But one of the questions that we got asked a lot is, well, what about if I'm teaching in a hybrid situation? And most people's definition of that seems to be having some kids in the brick and mortar classroom in front of you and other kids at home online via Zoom or Microsoft Teams or however you're connecting. And I wish we had a great answer for you there, but we don't. There are lots of things that teachers have figured out how to do, but that one is a really tricky one, and it's, as far as I can see, it's not something that we can really maximize our effectiveness in that kind of situation. We just do the best that we can. Just to show you an example of one wonderful teacher's approach to this, you can see her on the left, her classroom. Her kids are socially distanced with their computers at their seats, and she's also broadcasting or projecting the word work mat onto her screen. And meanwhile, there are kids who are following along at home doing the same activity. So that kind of thing, I think, can work. A lot of other kinds of reading instruction are going to be pretty challenging. And like I said, I wish we had the answers to that, but you know, we've got lots of good ideas, but we don't have all of the answers. So just as a reminder, when you go to the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub, I just want to show you a little bit about what you'll find there and just reorient you to some of the key points. So if you click on this, this is where you would appear on your homepage. And then as you scroll down, you will see 4 different tabs, and each of those tabs takes us to a different part of the hub. The first one is our lesson structure tab. And on this tab, this is where you'll find the lesson planning templates. You'll see some sample lessons, the planning guides, and there are a number of videos that you can watch to orient you to what virtual instruction can look like. The next tab is our instructional activities tab. And in there, this is where most of the materials, most of the resources that you'll be able to use to do your actual instruction. This is where you'll find them. And so they're organized according to kind of the category of instruction. So we've got phoneme graphing correspondences, we have encoding and decoding, we have resources for connected text, and so on. And so that's where a lot of the downloadable materials, or most of the downloadable materials, are. The next tab is our managing attention and behavior tab. And on this one, you will find some tips for keeping kids engaged in virtual instruction, which brings on a whole new set of challenges. So if you haven't explored there, you'll find some really good tips there, and also some videos that will show you how to do some things like teach kids how to respond chorally online. There are also some reinforcers, so some virtual stickers and some other activities that you can use as reinforcement for on-task behaviors. And then the last tab is our tech tools and tips. The Tech Tools and Tips tab, which I never can say that very well, is where you'll find all of the tutorials and resources for how to use the different technologies that can enhance your virtual teaching. You're going to hear more about all of these as we go through in response to some of the questions that have come up. Throughout the Virtual Teaching Hub, you will see this little red new sticker. Whenever we add something on, we put on this sticker as an indicator. So when you're scrolling around, looking different places, you can see which things might have been added since your last visit to the hub. We usually take those off after a few weeks just to let you know that they are new, but sometimes those stay on a little bit longer. But you'll see lots of new things. All of the things on here are added, and you'll hear about those as we go through. So one of the questions that's come up a lot is, if you're using materials from the UFLI Hub, can you change them? Can you edit them to meet your own needs and better fit your curriculum? And the answer is absolutely yes. We do have on the website just a statement that explains a little bit more about what you can and can't do. Basically, the idea is we're providing all of this for free to teachers, and we want them to be free. So you can use them, you can change them, you can make them your own in whatever way you want, but not in a way that you're going to go and sell them. That's our only real requirement. So just don't use it for any kind of commercial use and you're fine, but please use them in whatever way will make your instruction better. So another question that we've gotten a lot is, what about these other hubs? We've emphasized the Virtual Teaching Hub quite a bit, but we also have a dyslexia resource hub and a parent resource hub. So if you visit the UFLI website, you can certainly, we welcome you to visit all of those hubs. And if you click on those, the first one that you'll come to is the Dyslexia Resource Hub. And on the Dyslexia Resource Hub, you'll see there's different kinds of, there's 4 different buttons that'll take you to 4 different kinds of information. The first one is just information about dyslexia. And if you click on that, you'll see all sorts of information that just gives you a little bit of background about what dyslexia is, what kinds of screeners are available, myths about dyslexia. You can scroll down there and see that it keeps going. There's lots of different kinds of information on there. Also on the hub, there's a section on dyslexia policy. And each of these expands. If you click on one of those, it will expand and give you a little bit more information about dyslexia policy in the United States. And because we're a part of the University of Florida, there's also information about dyslexia policy in the state of Florida. On the professional development tab, you'll find all sorts of information about ways that you can get professional development in dyslexia, but we thought we'd use the opportunity to give a plug for our dyslexia graduate certificate. There is a link right there on the Dyslexia Resource Hub that'll take you to that, and you can find out about how you can learn all about dyslexia through University of Florida coursework. The other hub that we have is a parent resource hub. And on the parent resource hub, we've got information that goes from birth through high school ages. This is a little snip from the birth to pre-K range. And on there, you'll see information for parents and activities for children. Those are on each of the different tabs. On the birth to pre-K tab, we also have the developmental milestones for language and literacy development, which is a really good resource to learn about ways that parents can support kids as they develop. And there's also a section about different organizations and information that you can get from other sources other than UFLI. The Parent Resource Hub is just a little bit older than the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub. We developed it, remember back in March when we thought, oh, schools were going to close for a week or so, and what will parents do for that week with their kids to keep them learning? Well, we developed it for that purpose. Little did we know that we would still be having all this virtual instruction happening months later. Another question that we've gotten is about the virtual apps that we have. So we have two word work mats, the beginning mat and the intermediate mat. And both of these are used for decoding and encoding practice. And the idea here is that the kids can manipulate the letters and move them into boxes, or if you aren't in a situation where you can give your students remote control to be able to do that for you, and they don't have it on their own device, then they can, as we say, boss the teacher around and say, okay, what would I need to do? What should I do next? If I want to change SAT to MAT, what would I need to do? And this will show them. So this is the beginner mat, and then the next one is the intermediate mat. So the intermediate mat has, in addition to the basic alphabet, also has some common other letter combinations that can be used to spell words. So this is used for both decoding and encoding practice. So we can tell kids to change chord to corn. We can have a very simple thing like that is a encoding change where we're asking the child to spell the word. Or I could say, what if I change the N in corn to a D? What word would you have? And have the child decode. So that can be done both ways. The next tool that we have is the blending board. And this one is designed specifically for decoding practice, or getting kids to blend sounds together. And so for this activity, the idea is that the teacher is supposed to be controlling this. This is not one that you have kids manipulate, or at least it's not designed that way. You might be able to figure out a way to make that work, but it wasn't designed for that. What we designed it for was just like if you ever worked with a blending board, which is just cards that are set up on a board to put together different combinations of graphemes for kids to blend together the sounds. That is what this is for, where the teacher manipulates it, the teacher changes the letters, and the child decodes the word. So for that reason, we have things like some of our blends together. Normally, we wouldn't put an ST together on one tile if we were doing something for the students, because it makes two sounds. An SH to make shop, yes, SH makes one sound. So because the tiles are not for the students, that seems to work just fine. What we have set up is a initial, medial, and final position that can be changed. And then there's the silent E at the end or a plural S that you can add. But the idea here is that the teacher is doing the manipulation, the student is actually just doing the reading of the word.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lane. I'd now like to welcome back Alyssa Ricky, Jennifer Bigos, and Valentina Contess. They will be taking us through and answering some questions about our tech tools for online instruction and our management tips for virtual teaching. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, thank you so much, Colleen. So a lot of the questions that we got after, during, before about these webinars had to deal with technology. And we know we've shared this tech tool spreadsheet with you already, but we wanted to let you know that we're continuously updating and adding new tutorials and resources to this spreadsheet. Some of the things we've added so far are more resources and tutorials about document cameras and Bitmoji classrooms, and even a huge list of learning platform tutorials as well. We added a lot of engagement tools that we got from you guys from taking the survey at the bottom. We got tons. Me and Jen have been going through and looking through the responses and adding them to the spreadsheet. We even have some so it shows if it's paid or if it's free. And another big request we got was dealing with Google Slides and how to use the grid view to build engagement and have more opportunities to respond. So we've even added a tutorial about that from YouTube, and that's underneath the engagement tool section. So if you have a question, remember you can always go to YouTube Academy, as we call it, or you can come here to see, because we've already kind of curated and made sure these links are good sources of information. And just to remember and give yourselves a little bit of grace, this is a very challenging time for all of us. And we can do our best. And this isn't about the technology, it's about your instruction. The technology is just a tool for your instruction. So just to keep that in mind, I think that's important to remember. Another set of questions that we got a lot about was about assessment. And Valentina's going to address a little bit about some tips and tricks for doing assessment.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Like Ali said, we did have a lot of questions about assessment, especially it being the beginning of the school year. At this time, we do not have our own assessment resources available. But we encourage you to use the assessments that are used at your school and your district. And what we have found most useful for the assessments that we are used to administering, either for screening or ongoing progress monitoring, is screenshots of PDFs of those assessments and placing those screenshots in a PowerPoint, just like how our lesson plan PowerPoints help guide your instruction. These screenshots on slides allow you to move your students through the different assessment parts. Here you see just a screenshot of the Dibbles Nonsense Word Fluency Assessment, where the child is looking at the slide with the 2 practice words as the teacher is administering those directions. On the next slide, you'll see that we are also using the boxes for visual isolation as much as possible, because it is more difficult for students to be able to see the content on the screen for the assessment. So that has been really helpful as well. On the next slide, it's just to show you kind of a visual of what it would look like. The assessment with the PowerPoint would be going on your computer or laptop, and then you would have your printed scoring sheet just like normal, where you are recording the students' responses. Because of the change from administering face-to-face to digital, we do want to put out there that there is going to be a change of about the validity and reliability of the assessments, but for the most part, we have found that we are still able to administer most of the assessments that we are used to administering face-to-face within the digital platform. And now Jen is going to talk a little bit more about the benefit of informal assessments as well.
Thanks, Val. That was some great information about formal assessments. Informal assessments are also a form of assessment. They can very easily be incorporated into your classroom instruction and activities to quickly gauge student understanding during a lesson. So let's take a look at a few examples that can be incorporated into your face-to-face, virtual, or blending learning model. I loved using 3-2-1 exit tickets in my classroom. Exit tickets are simply that. They're a ticket that they hand into you as they exit the door. If it's a physical door or a virtual door, they are a quick way to see what your students learned, what they enjoyed, and what you might need to review just a little bit. Your observations as a teacher, though, are the most important form of assessment. Just like in the brick and mortar classroom, checklists can be very helpful. Kahoot and Slido are 2 free websites that you can use for a variety of purposes. They allow all students to respond to a discussion, a quiz, a survey, or an opinion poll. You can quickly see if your class is ready to move on, and they also allow for more student response opportunities. Most video conferencing platforms have some form of a chat or a polling option within them. Presenting a question and monitoring the chat can allow you to quickly survey your students' knowledge and increase participation and discussion, especially for those reluctant to be on camera or speak in the face-to-face or digital class, because we did get a lot of questions about that. What about the kids who aren't on camera? So that brings us to our next topic, which is student engagement. And Val, we got a few questions about student engagement submitted to us. Can you share some information on this topic with our viewers?
Of course. So it definitely is different for students to engage with virtual instruction, but we have seen that it is really very possible for them to have high levels of engagement while you're teaching online. And the main way that we have found that students can do this is by receiving a lot of opportunities to respond throughout the lesson. You can do this through oral responses from your students, where they are answering questions, reading words together. Using a whiteboard and marker is a great way for all students to be able to provide a response as well, along with hand signals like thumbs up, raise a hand, touch your head, stand up, and such. And then of course for older students who are able to type and have learned how to use the chat feature like Jen mentioned, they can also provide responses in that way. Of course, in order for them to provide some of these responses, they need some basic materials. We have found that students have to have at least something to write with and write on. And so this is kind of the ideal set of materials for our students, which includes a marker and eraser, a whiteboard, and then if possible, some sort of lined paper placed in a plastic sleeve or any kind of clear sleeve so that students have some sort of lined surface to provide written responses on. And we do have those available on the hub. Another great way for students to be actively engaged and for all students in your small group to be able to participate is through the use of choral reading. So students can chorally read, a group of 4 students could read words in isolation together or text together. And it does take a little bit of coaching of how to do that. And at first it sounds a little bit rough, but eventually students get really great at being able to read at the same time. One question we've gotten asked a lot through webinar questionnaires as well as on our Facebook support group is how do you listen to just one child read at a time to be able to gather that informal assessment data during your instruction. And we have figured out through collaborating with other educators like you that a great way to do this is since you have access to muting participants, you can mute all of the students in your group except for one, so that you are able to listen to that one student while the other students are still reading, to be able to focus on that one child's reading and possibly even provide some feedback on their reading as well. And remote control, we have learned students love access to remote control, especially for things like our digital word work mat. This when you click remote control, you'll see any of your participants in your small group listed, for example, Dr. Lane, and you can select the person who gets remote control. An important thing to note is that only one student can have remote control at once. But of course, while one student is controlling whatever you are working on, the other students can be collaborating and providing feedback as well. You do have the ability to abort control at any time, which is important to know in case things get out of control. You can just say, okay, I'm gonna go back and do the controlling now. Another great thing to note is that you can just teach your students to let go control at some point so that you can fix things or help guide certain things as well. So again, really explicit directions and clear expectations of the use of remote control are really important. We have also been asked a lot about how to deal with problem behaviors that may occur during instruction. And this is something that we believe it's really important to support behavior along with having really great instruction. It's very important that we provide positive behavior supports as much as possible so that we don't even hopefully need to worry too much about kind of behavioral difficulties occurring. So kind of our top 3 things that we recommend related to positive behavior supports is, of course, building that very positive student-teacher relationship, which occurs, you know, during a lesson, but also outside of a lesson, during your virtual morning meeting, during maybe one-on-one time with a student, getting to know their family, and so on. The other next very important thing is having positively stated expectations for your instruction and engagement during virtual learning, as well as providing really frequent behavior-specific praise. So going beyond just saying, you did a great job today, or you're doing a great job, and saying things like, you did a great job sounding out that word, or things like, you're doing a great job staying in your area so I can see you and hear you. So it can be behavior-specific praise about their instructional engagement and also their behavior during the lesson. Beyond just verbal positive reinforcement, oh, I forgot we put this in here. So these are our resources that we have for our visual schedule and expectations visuals. So you'll find these in the management tab on the hub. But as I was saying, beyond verbal encouragement throughout and behavior-specific praise, a lot of groups of students have been benefiting from ending a virtual lesson with more of a reinforcing activity at the end. So we have added this new resource to the hub, which is just a list of some ideas of quick, simple activities that you're able to engage in with your students at the end of a lesson, such as doing a quick movement or dancing activity, playing a virtual game, and so on. Something to note is that some of these examples seem like they are more primary focused, but keep in mind that older students are happy just talking, doing show and tell as well, sharing TikTok dances, and so on. So it can also be very engaging to end with this type of activity for older students as well. And now Jen is going to talk a little bit more about the importance of collaboration.
Thanks, Val. And I did a great job staying in my area while you were presenting.
You did. Thanks, Jen, for staying in your area.
Thanks, Val. So I also just wanted to give a little reminder to our viewers about all those school-based service providers that may be available to you in your schools or in your school district to provide you with support. So when you're in your face-to-face classrooms, you might find that you engage with your special education teachers, your school counselors, behavior resource teachers, speech language pathologists, assistive technology specialists, or some other type of support staff. So don't forget about the value of those staff members and the contributions that they can make to your preparing, your planning, and even the delivery of your virtual or blended instruction with your students during this time. So that brings us to Allie. Allie, we get quite a few questions about scheduling, and I was wondering, can you share some tips with our viewers tonight that might be helpful to them?
Yes, absolutely. So previously, we've showcased in our spotlights and our other webinars from the reading series, we've talked about different tools that we've provided for you guys, like the planning table that we talked about inside of the primary and the intermediate webinars. And we also talked about the visual schedule that you can use for individual lessons. However, several teachers have been asking questions about their overall reading block schedule. Now, most importantly, to point out, districts and your schools are the ones that are primarily going to dictate the time spent in certain activities online, asynchronously, and even the modes of your teaching. But just like face-to-face, virtual instruction should include several things that you do in face-to-face. You should have some whole group, and you should have some small group, and you should have some individual work where the children can practice, or even be one-on-one with the teacher. Now, thinking a little bit more in depth about whole group instruction that you do when you're in a virtual learning platform, it can be difficult to engage, and especially going back to what Jen and Val were talking about with the opportunities to respond, it can be a little bit difficult to do that in whole group. And so we advise that to try to limit that as much as you can, and think very purposely about what activities you want to be doing whole group. Many of the whole group lessons you do might be better served being taped and recorded previously, and the children can watch it asynchronously. And then discussions and small groups and activities can happen after they watch that recording in a better way to engage the students. A lot of the materials that we've already created and put on the hub are actually more geared towards a small group or one-on-one setting. We recommend as much as you can to do small group instruction. A question that was brought up multiple times relates to, what are the other students doing when you're doing small group with a small group of students? So honestly, it can be very similar to what face-to-face is. We're not reinventing the wheel, we're just tweaking it a little bit. So students can be in their own workstations, they can be working collaboratively, they could be doing independent work, and they're doing that all on their own individual devices while you are conducting your small group in your video conferencing platform. Individually, they can be practicing opportunities, they can have practice opportunities, they can be doing provided activities, they could even be working on other digital learning platforms and computer programs. Or they can even be having other learning opportunities by watching those asynchronous videos that you've given them and completing some extension activities. There's even some area for collaboration to happen while you're in your small group. They could be doing something collaboratively, collaborating in a breakout room maybe, or they can even, especially the older children, they could be collaborating inside of a document like a Google Doc that all of them can be working on together. And I've already been hearing teachers are probably the most creative bunch of any profession I see out there. And they're very creative in knowing what their students are doing and what they're doing and keeping an eye and inventing and trying to keep them engaged. So though we can't give you a perfect reading block schedule, just look to what you do in the face-to-face classroom, see what your district is saying, and then see how you can schedule your day to build the most opportunities for students to engage and respond.
Thank you, ladies, so much. That was some wonderful, wonderful information, and I think you answered a lot of really great questions. I would now like to welcome Talia Campese. She is going to join Valentina to go over some questions and information from our intermediate and primary spotlight webinars. Welcome.
Thanks, Colleen. Hi, everyone. Hi again. So we've gotten a lot of questions about how to use our scope and sequence and some of our materials to be able to provide this effective instruction. So all of our materials and hopefully our tutorials and sample videos are with the mindset that effective instruction really needs to be both explicit and systematic, and that it needs to include a lot of corrective feedback when needed, as well as that behavior-specific praise that I mentioned earlier. One of the ways that you can ensure that your instruction is systematic is by using a scope and sequence. A scope and sequence allows you to progress through skills and concepts in a really sequential way, from most simple to more complex. We do have a UFLI scope and sequence available on the hub if you don't have one available through your school or district, and there's the QR code for that. One new thing we are very excited to share with you that will hopefully allow you to provide a very explicit introduction to concepts are our grapheme introduction PowerPoints, or Google Slides now. These will allow you to introduce a grapheme and the placement of that grapheme, along with some sample words and activities. So here you see how the PowerPoints are laid out. And you'll notice when you download these that in the notes section, there's actually a little bit of a scripted introduction language for you to use if you would like to. At the end, there's a slide for you to include additional activities for practice with these concepts, and you'll see some of the things we've already mentioned in previous webinars, such as the word cards used for word swords, the word list, and the Wheel of Names resource. And those are all available now in the phoneme grapheme section of the hub in their separate categories, such as the alphabet category, art control vowels, consonant digraphs, and so on. Another great new resources that we've added are our roll and read mats. This resource will allow you to provide your students with a lot of practice with a targeted concept by them reading words with that targeted concept. And so this is what the whole resource looks like. And if we zoom in, you'll see that the resource is meant to be used with the students engaging by rolling a die. So that can be a physical die if you're able to have your students either pick up a die or drop off this kind of material, or you can use a digital die for this. So the idea of this is that they roll whatever number they land on, they read a word from that column. And as you can see, all of the words are focused on one concept. In the template, you'll see that you have the option to use little cards to cover up the words, where as students roll on that number, you uncover the word for them to read, or you can use the annotate tool on Zoom or your other platform for students to cross out the words as they read them, and they really enjoy doing this. We've also added some templates for board game mats. So there are PDF versions of them as well as PowerPoint versions of them that allow you to type in words. So you can see that I created this game to be silent E with long A focus. And this would be played just like a regular board game, but digitally. So we have a few options of these. Yep, just like that. We have a few options for these, and you can adapt them in any way that you want and use whatever target words you are working on with your students. Again, you can use those word lists and word cards resources to help you generate the words to use for that word reading practice. You are also able to just type in words for your students or stack word cards based on our word cards resource as you play the game as well. So there's definitely different ways to use these templates, but we hope that they're useful to you and giving your students a lot of word reading practice. And these are found in our new section that's called Games and Principles. So these will be in the Decoding Encoding section. We've also gotten questions about how to engage students with word work activities asynchronously. So when students are not live with you doing a small group, what are ways that they can be engaging in encoding and decoding practice? At our management webinar, we shared a video clip of Allie using our manipulative letters PowerPoint to engage students in a lesson that was pre-recorded for them. So that's a great example of how to use some of the materials to pre-record lessons for students to watch to engage in instruction. That is now posted in our word work section. And then on the right are just some ideas for how to use the word work map for asynchronous instruction. So as you know, the link can work on any computer or tablet, so students could log on at home, and you can provide either an audio file with words for them to listen to and spell, where you can give them the word, give them time to spell it, and then ask, did you use C-A-T? Good. Read your word, cat. And so kind of give directions that way, or you can do things like provide pictures on a Word document or PDF that students are creating words for, where the answers are posted somewhere else on your platform for digital instruction. So just a few additional ideas for the word work mat as well. In order for some students to be able to engage in encoding and decoding through pre-recorded videos or audio files, they need some sort of manipulative letter. So we have created these very accessible printable graphing tiles that parents can either print at home or they can pick up at school for them to just cut out and have placed on a mat for students to be able to have the alphabet and any additional graphings that they're working on. So we're excited to share with you tonight that this is also posted in that Games and Printables news section on the Hub. And now we are actually going to talk more about differentiation. We've gotten a lot of questions, ongoing questions about how to differentiate instruction for students who are English language learners or students with disabilities. Again, all of our materials are intended to be used to be able to provide really explicit and systematic instruction, which helps all learners, including students with disabilities and English language learners. But we did want to talk about some specific adjustments that can be used in order to differentiate instruction even further. The first one is visual supports. Team UFLI loves using visuals with instruction when they are needed or helpful for student learning. On the left, you see some words that would be read during decoding encoding practice. Things like soak, a tier 2 word, would be really helpful to include a picture. Same thing with words with multiple meanings, like bark, in order to explain that that word has 2 meanings using pictures. And for students who are English language learners or maybe have language disabilities, it's really important to remember that they may need visual supports for tier 1 vocabulary. So more simple words like bread, house, park, and things like that, that may seem like you don't need to provide supports for these students. It's helpful to do that. Also, when you're working on morphemes with older students, also very helpful to provide picture examples, for example, for the word erupt. And whenever possible, using pictures that relate to their real life or from their real life is really helpful for students who are English language learners and who may have, again, some language difficulties. And this is just an example of using the students' actual playground at their school when talking about playground as a word that they're approaching in text. The next thing we wanted to mention is that a lot of sources that are listed under our connected text section have text available in other languages. So on the left, you see a Reading A to Z text for younger learners that have both Spanish and English version, as well as the News ELA resource on the right. Some students who are maybe learning English as a second language but have Spanish as their primary language, as their native language, you might be able to use text in Spanish to introduce the new text in English, or to provide an overview of vocabulary at the beginning of a lesson. And of course, if you are in a dual language program, these texts are really helpful to have in both languages. Another way to differentiate both for students who may need a little bit of extra support as well as more mature learners is by using real images instead of clip art. So this is helpful because they can relate it to an actual object, such as this example with the cat. And then you see that this phonemic awareness activity for older learners was made with colors that are a little bit more mature, the blue gradient, and that can just be very easily done by clicking the shapes and selecting new colors within PowerPoint or Google Slides. And now my colleague Talia is going to help answer some questions we've received about reading connected text with your students in the virtual environment.
Thanks, Valentina. I appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Yes, we've seen all of the responses and all the questions about wanting some examples of connected text. So we've added 4 new videos for you of different age groups and different groups of students. Next, we're going to watch probably only 1 minute of this connected text video with intermediate students. On the next slide. We'll watch 1 minute of this and then move on and discuss it.
Your faces are Zoe and Christine. Rodriguez colored hands with a towel. I bet they sell at the craft fair.
Good, keep reading.
I'm just excited that they're considered good enough to be entered in the community-wide fair, squealed Christine. Shh, do you hear that? Interrupted Mrs. Bryce.
Excellent reading, girls. I love how you just kept your own pace and read the words correctly. Very nice. So we have these words, cooed and squealed, describing how Christine was talking. Based on that, do you think she's excited, sad, nervous, happy? How do you think Christine's feeling about Ms. Rodriguez's vases?
Happy, excited.
Can you guys?
I think she admires them, kind of.
Why do you think that, Avinia?
Because it says she like cooed at them, and cooed kind of means that like you say it kind of sweetly and like nicely and like cute.
Great definition of that, Avinia. Emery, can you add any evidence to support what Avinia was saying?
And she said, I bet they'd sell out at the craft fair.
Right. You probably like something you think's going to sell out, right? And we'll pause right there. Thank you. You just noticed that there's some back and forth with the students. When one student answered, I asked another student to add on. You'll notice the language was for older students. Can you add on some evidence to support that versus what else do you know? Just little tweaks like that can really help engage your students. You could have also had them privately chat to you at this time, but just making sure that they had the chance to respond. If them both reading is not, like we said earlier, just muting one student at a time and listening to them read. Personally, if they finish at different times, that's okay with me. They do that in real life too. So on the next slide, we'll notice some more things. Thank you. So there's some really great resources on Reading A to Z again and Newsela. Here's an example from Reading A to Z. When you're working with older students who still need access to really high quality content, but might not be at that reading level to gather all of that information all the time, there are great resources out there that help make the reading level at a level they can access for the good content. You'll notice here with the story with Barack Obama and his life, it's the same amount of content at 3 different reading levels for these students. And then if we look at one specific sentence from these contexts, you'll see that the sentences get more complex, the vocabulary gets more complex, and this allows the same amount of high quality content to be accessed at different levels. If you do not have access to something like this, or the text you choose for your student does not have this available, a really simple solution is to take that same text and just type it into a PowerPoint slide and add your own images, where the images on the left side of the screen might put an older student off and make them not want to work for you. If you use pictures of them actually in a library or their friends in a library, they might be more willing to read a text that's more simple for them. The PowerPoint slide could look just like this. It's not, you don't have to be fancy. I just suggest you cite your source just in case. We never want this copyright people coming after us. With writing, we also had a lot of questions. A lot of the questions we had were related to how to use the Google Slides in grid view. We have added a great resource to that on the resource page Allie had mentioned earlier. There's also some really great tips to think about, is always connecting it back to the connected text you're reading. For the older students, it's really helpful to have something they can write on and show you. That CAPS is a really great resource to help them edit. You might have to have your students take the mirroring off your Zoom. There's great resources for that as well. A really great tip for your older students, I love having them write a question that I've dictated to them. Like, who was the unexpected guest in our story we just read? They would have to write that out, and then they can also respond to the text through the writing to make that connection. That a writing is a really great way to make a connection and discuss text. And finally, we had quite a few questions about how to choose the morphemes you want to instruct with your older students or even some younger students. It's really important to consider multiple pieces when you're choosing what morphemes to pick. You really want to get the most bang for your buck. I always like to start with whatever scope and sequence I'm using and the standards that I'm supposed to be teaching at that time. If it's saying Greek and Latin root words, that's what I'm going to choose first and look at my scope and sequence to see what would fit there. There's also some great research out there that you can find from Dr. Lane and some other researchers that have found the morphemes that come up the most often. I also then like to consider what my students are reading. If we have a book study going on and there's a morpheme in there that they really would benefit from, like if we're talking about transportation, learning the morpheme port would help them be really successful in reading that text. And finally, looking at their other content areas in science and math and social studies. If you're learning about volcanoes, learning rupt would be really important, or a geometry lesson. Having the try, by, poly words, those morphemes would be really helpful and help build them up for success. So we're going to wrap it up today. I'm going to send it back to Colleen.
Thank you, Talia, and thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. This was such great information. I think we got a lot of really good questions answered. I'd like to welcome back Dr. Lane to close us out this evening.
Thanks, Colleen, and thank you everybody for attending. And we hope that we have answered some of your lingering questions about the webinars and about the Virtual Teaching Hub. We are planning additional webinars coming up in the next several weeks and months ahead. So please keep following us on Facebook so that you'll know when those are going to happen. And I can't end without giving one more plug to or one more request. If you are enjoying and using our resources, we really would appreciate if you could consider giving to UFLI, to the University of Florida Literacy Institute, and supporting this work. So thank you again for coming, and we'll see you next time.